Well, apparently when U.S. Senator Dr. Tom Coburn attended med school, he missed the Mary Poppins class on a little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down. Ever since his arrival in Congress, Coburn has preached a message of fiscal responsibility, and he doesn't sugarcoat it.
We're going to have to work hard, we're going to have to contribute more, we're going to have to do more, and we're going to have to take less. And that's the answer. And anybody that tells you something other than that either is drinking something funny or isn't looking at the real numbers.
During one of his August town hall meetings, I was able to sit down with him to discuss a subject he believes is more dire today than ever before. With the debt deal that was reached this summer, are we any closer to having some sensible deficit reduction that you've been talking about ever since you came to Congress?
Well, I think we're closer in regards to people recognizing we have to do something. I don't think we're any closer in terms of doing anything. I think what happened is we kicked the can down the road, and I think by November or December, I don't think anything significant is going to happen. I think 60 votes will change the requirements of what happened in the Senate, and we just won't do it. I mean, that's a skeptical opinion. I think what's going to happen, has to happen, is the American people are going to have to demand certain fundamental changes, like a constitutional amendment to balance the budget, actually making the hard cuts in areas where people routinely don't want us to make hard cuts, and people being willing to lose their position as an elected representative to either Congress or the Senate, House or the Senate, to actually fix what's wrong with our country.
Now, let me ask you about that balanced budget amendment. Could we have fought World War II with a balanced budget?
Sure, because it has an exception that you can borrow money for a national emergency in terms of time of war.
Now, in July, you presented your Back in Black program, and you really saved no sacred cows. Entitlements, defense, agricultural subsidies, they were all in there. Can such a proposal make it through the buzzsaw of special interest that Washington, D.C. is?
Probably not, but you know, I didn't put it out there so that it would get voted on. They weren't going to vote on it anyway. I put it out there because nobody has ever put forward specific spending reductions in detail, backed up by research that says you should do these things.
Now, I found it a little bit ironic that you were criticized by the no tax pledge crowd for trying to close some loopholes, to corporate loopholes and things to the wealthy. What's your reaction to that?
I think they're misguided. I think Americans ought to be very careful about anything they hear from Washington, whether it's inside the Senate or interest groups outside trying to influence it, because most of the time there's agenda behind it. And the agenda is not necessarily what is presented when you hear from those organizations.
Can we ever get the heavy lifting of reducing the deficit? Can we get it done as long as we have two sides, whether it be left or right, that has very hard ideologic rigidness?
Sure, it's going to happen.
How?
But nobody's going to loan us the money. It's going to happen. You know, Ben Bernanke said that 2.5 years ago. It's not that these things aren't going to happen. It's how painful are they going to be when they happen, and are they going to be done under our control? So I will tell you, within 2 or 3 years, we're going to make all these hard decisions. The question is will we do it because we no longer can borrow money and we're like Greece and have to? In other words, as a condition of getting the next dose of morphine, money, will you do these things, or will we do it in a way that protects the underlying social safety net better and in a way that preserves the future for our kids better? And so we're going to do it. You know, it's like saying, you know, Medicare is going to change whether people on Medicare want it to change or not. And that is because there's no way we can borrow the money to fund it unless we change it.
Okay, so does this all go back to maybe the same debate we were having 2 years ago about health care?
Well, a lot of it's health care. A lot of our problems are health care. You know, we're going to spend about $800 billion of the federal government, of your money, actually borrowed money, on health care. And how we do it is very inefficient. $1 and $3 gets wasted. We need to fix health care. And the plans that have been passed in the last year aren't going to fix it in a way that is sustainable without rationing care and markedly decreasing the quality of care.
I want to ask you about something that I've heard you say in talking about family responsibility to the elderly and the frail. I have family that are, as they reach those final years of their life, I know that I was very thankful for some of the government programs in place. It made everyone's life easier. I would have hated to had private insurance going through and doing all the things I have to do with private insurance when my mother was in a medical facility. Reaction to that?
Well, it's great that the government thought it could afford to do that for you, but in fact it was borrowing money and borrowing the future potential of your kids to be able to do that. So it's a trade-off. We can cut our kids' legs off and say, you don't get the economic opportunity. You're going to have a tax rate that's twice what ours was, because quite frankly, we've benefited over the last 30 years off your next 30 years of prosperity, potential prosperity. So, you know, it's a trade-off. And, you know, the Americans are going to make that decision outside of once we get past the big hiccup that we have in terms of our debt. But until then, international financiers are going to tell you whether or not we're going to be able to do that for your mother.
And Dr. Coburn, you know you're kind of prescribing a very bitter pill.
Well, you know, it's easy to spend money that's not yours, but when the bill comes due, you still have to pay the bill. And what many young people and middle-aged people in this country want to deny that there's a bill coming due. And the fact is that there it is. It doesn't have to be all that bitter. What it is it's a rejection of our heritage. Our heritage, the thing that made our country great, was sacrifice. And now we have people saying, no, I don't want to sacrifice. I don't have to give up anything to get our country right again. We're going to have to give up a lot. And everybody's going to have to. And if we don't, then you know what? We're going to have a markedly lowered standard of living. We're not going to have the things that you thought were great for your mother. They're not going to be there. No matter who's paying for them, they're not going to be there. So it's a matter of really stark choices, because we've had a career politicians that have refused to make choices and refused to be honest with the American people about the situation that our country's really in.
I'll leave you with this one last question. I followed your career since you first went into Congress, since you went in the House of Representatives. And in that time, you have pretty much been singing from the same songbook about wasteful spending and deficit reduction. What makes this time different?
I used to worry about my kids. I don't worry about my kids anymore. I'm worried about us. You know, I used to think this was 5 or 10 years off. It's not. It's next year or the year after. It's coming. And if you can't see it, then you're not paying attention to the news.
And I continue my conversation with Dr. Coburn on our website. Simply head to okhorizon.com and click on Value Added.